in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hi, and welcome to Exploring Hobbies. I'm your host, Randy Nunez. And today's hobby we're going to talk about is radio control. And to talk to us about radio control is Noel Hunt. Welcome to the show, Noel.
Hi, Randy. Well, good to be here.
Thank you. So tell us, what is radio control, or it's also known as RC?
RC. Yeah, it can also be called remote control, but really it's radio. There are a few controllers that are used infrared, but mostly it's the radios. Radio control is a hobby for controlling model stuff, and we're going to be talking about aircraft, but radio control can be boats, cars, tanks. There's quite a lot of other forms of radio control, but the one I'm interested in and take a lot of time participating in is model aircraft, radio control model aircraft.
So how did you get started?
A long time ago, when I was at high school, I worked at a model shop, hobby shop, and they sold them there. I don't think I ever took a paycheck home. I think I spent all of it on model aircraft. And so got started on that in South Africa, incidentally, about 40 years ago. Spent some time doing that, and then life got in the way and did other stuff. And then about 8 years ago, got back into it here, and have been enjoying it ever since.
Okay. How did you get into it? Did you buy one? Did you see it on television? Did you have friends?
Yeah, just looking at it in a store, you know, they
store?
just intrigued me. I'd always been interested in aviation, and to be able to control an aircraft was pretty intriguing to me. So I bought the first one from that hobby shop. Didn't really have anyone to help me with it, and eventually found somebody at a club out there that got me going. Gliders fascinated me, and we had the ideal situation there, so I started flying gliders in South Africa. And then
Did you start flying model gliders or real gliders?
Model gliders,
okay.
yeah. Because it was a fairly windy city that we lived in, and you need a little bit of wind on the slopes for the gliders, whereas the powered airplanes, the wind is not so friendly. So that's how I got started with it then. This time around, I just happened to stumble across a club and saw them flying and got interested again. I had the time.
Okay. So are there different kinds or different factions within the radio control hobby other than just different types of transportation devices?
Yeah,
or?
there are, especially within the aviation. There's anything from scale, and I've got a couple of examples of scale aircraft here. There are models of existing full-size airplanes. But there's a group within our club that flies combat, where the planes don't look like anything you'd see in real life. But they throw 5 or 6 of them in the air at one time. They each have a 30-foot streamer behind them, and they try and cut each other's streamers. A lot of carnage in an event like that, so that's combat. There is Pylon Racing, which is just flat out, race as hard as you can, much like the full-size ones at Reno.
Is that where you fly the plane around the pylon,
Yes.
almost like a track for racing cars?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
and there's usually 3 pylons, and they have heats. Usually, I think it's 5 or 6 laps per heat. Some of the planes get to go pretty fast, and your reflexes have got to be quick. I mentioned the gliders. That's another one. Large scale, or giant scale as we call it. Some of the aircraft are now running 250cc engines in them, and they're big. Aerobatics. There are competitions for aerobatics within it. So a lot of different elements once you get into it. Helicopters is huge these days, especially with the younger guys. Some of the things that you can do with a model helicopter you would never see a real one do in terms of aerobatics.
Speaking of that, I remember seeing a video on YouTube, and the helicopter was doing unseemly things.
Yes.
Flying upside down and
Right.
all kinds of funny
Right.
angles that a traditional helicopter
Correct.
could not do.
Yeah. Because of the inertia in the blades are so much smaller in a model. You can throw them around, whereas in a large one you shake the aircraft apart. So yeah, the models can do a lot more.
Wow. So what kind of people get involved with radio control hobby?
Oh, just about everybody. It's one of those things that if you have a passion for aviation, the model aviation just gives you a way to get involved with that. We've got doctors, we've got dentists, we've got guys who've worked the line at auto assembly plants. One of our really good modelers is a welder, and he's really good at putting stuff together. In fact, when we break an engine, he's the guy that we go to for helping to put it back together. it's people from all walks of life, but the one common element is a passion for aviation. So to say what types of people tend to be the engineering kind of frame of mind, but not necessarily engineers. You can get into designing and building, the construction. There's a lot of technology within them if you want to get that way, but it's also like an iPad or a computer. You don't have to know how the guts work if you want to use it. So I think that's why it appeals to such a wide variety of people.
So families also participate?
Definitely. Yeah, we've got the combat group that I was telling you about. The two sons are national champions in combat, and the dad does the pitting. So yeah, we do get families involved. A lot of the wives like to be there with their husbands, and some of them fly as well. We have outings where families get together, and we've got one member whose enlarged family gathers once a year at our flying field, and the last time he was there, I think there were 35 members of his family, just his family there.
Wow.
Just to get together with Granddad, you know. So definitely a family thing, but it's also an individual thing, because once you're out there with an aircraft, you're pretty much you and the airplane. So it brings in the families, but it can also be for those who just want to be on their own, get away from work or the other elements of life that get in the way sometimes.
Wow. So it can be a solo
Yes.
effort, or it can be a very much even bringing people together
Right,
in terms of
right.
groups and things like
A
that.
lot of us get into it wanting to fly an airplane. You know, we see a P-51 and we say, man, I'd love to be able to fly a P-51 Mustang. And so you get into the hobby for wanting to fly, and then you find the technical side is kind of cool. You know, you can buy all this stuff and you can make it work and figure out how it works. But ultimately, where we find ourselves is the social side. Just hanging out with a bunch of guys that talk the way you do and have the same kind of sense of humor that you have. And when you crash one, you can kind of feel for the other guy. So, like I say, most of us get in it for the flying, and we stay in it for the social side.
Are most of the people either pilot wannabes or pilots, or it's really all over the...
We do have both. We've got a lot of guys who have formerly been pilots, and they either can't get their medical certification to fly full-size aircraft anymore, but they want to stay with aviation. We've got guys who are just kind of scared of being up in the air. They'd rather have their feet on the ground while they're controlling.
So you might actually have people scared of heights flying
Yeah,
airplanes.
yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
It is, yeah. And then I've got a good friend who's a pilot, and I've brought him over to try and fly these, and he's adamant that these are much harder to fly than a real one,
Really?
because it's all third party or third person. You know, the plane's out there, you're standing on the ground, so everything is visual. Your depth perception is kind of tough. And then there's a unique situation, whereas when the plane's going away from you, if you turn your controller, and I've brought one here with me.
So this is a device that you would use
Yeah.
to control the plane.
Right, so
Right?
we would control this. This stick is used for your roll control. So when it's going away from you, you push it, the stick the direction you want to go. In this case, I want to go that way. So the plane is going to turn. Now, as it's turning with the left wing low, it comes back towards me. The left wing is still low, but it feels like it's reversed. And that's what every first timer, the trouble they have is when the plane's coming towards them, they want to roll the wrong way. So the instruction programs we have kind of get us over that. But for full-size pilots, they all say that's the toughest thing for them to learn.
Oh, that's interesting. So since you're using equipment that has radio frequencies involved, is there a certain kind of licensing that you have to go through to do that?
No, it's much like a CB radio. There are designated frequencies that we may use, and there's strengths of radio signal that we're allowed. The manufacturer takes care of that for us. So as long as you stay within those requirements, there's no licensing required. There is a ham band radio that is available. Some of our members use that, and of course that you have to be licensed, the same as a ham radio operator would need to be. But for the rest of us, it's like a walkie-talkie or a CB radio in terms of licensing and government control, if you will.
So you talked about you can buy this equipment, but you can also build it yourself. Do you have people that build their own radio control models?
The radio itself used to be, quite a few folks built the radio. I haven't heard of that in quite some years now. The computer radios are very sophisticated, and we all like to have them. But in terms of the models, yeah, you can You can start out with a blank sheet of paper, design your own, build it with whatever materials. I chose to use balsa and plywood in this one. This one is my own design based on a...
So this one is yours that you built?
Yeah, it's based on a
Really?
Piper Cub, but I designed it and built it. The one that we've got in the front there...
This larger one?
Yeah, the P51. That comes pretty much assembled. All you have to do is put the parts together, but it's covered. It's what we call an almost ready-to-fly model.
So it's a kit, if you will.
Yeah, a little more than a kit. Kit would be a bunch of sticks of balsa that you put together and cover to somebody else's design. But an almost ready-to-fly is just the wings and the wheels, etc. are loose. You put them together, you put your own radio in it, and you're ready to fly.
Oh, I see. It's more of semi-assembled.
There you go. Yes.
Okay.
It's a good way to refer to it.
Okay.
And then there are some right now where it's ready to go. You take it out of the box, you charge the battery, and you fly it. So there's everything, from start from a piece of paper to take it out of the box and fly.
So given that, how much does it cost? How expensive can this hobby be?
To get started, about $250 will get you a really good startup package. That's for the equipment and the aircraft and the equipment.
So what is the equipment?
It would be the radio control and the necessary stuff to get the engine going if you go with an internal combustion aircraft. You can go less expensive than that. It's usually a bit of a challenge because the level of equipment is not as good. Mm-hmm. You can go a lot more expensive, but that'd be a good entry point. Where does it stop? There are some of the jets that use a real jet engine that you would find on a full-size aircraft.
A small-scale jet engine, literally.
Yes, and that'll be anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for an aircraft. So, there's the sky's the limit depending on how sophisticated you want to get. Something as small as this, I probably put the plane together for $20, and then it's got the electronics inside, but had to do it myself. So the range is extreme.
Okay.
One of the other, if I could, one of the other cost elements is these things can be dangerous. So there's a liability insurance coverage that we can get through our national organization, the AMA. That is a $58 a year subscription. And then most clubs take a annual fee for mowing the grass and keeping the club facilities looking good. And that can run anywhere from $50 to $100. So those are your incremental costs that you have.
So speaking of maintaining the grass, where do you find to fly these models?
Most of the models are flown at AMA chartered clubs because of the space requirement and also the liability insurance. The AMA has a website, and if I can get it right, it's modelaircraft.org.
www.modelaircraft.org?
That's it, yes. And on that, you can type in your zip code, and it'll come up with a list of clubs within a range, and you can select 25-mile radius or a 50-mile radius or whatever. The clubs are ideal to go to because not only do you get the facilities and the large runway, but you can link up with folks who can help you get started. Learning to fly one of these on your own it's not easy. It's really tough. But if you go with what we call a buddy box, two of the controllers linked by a cable, the instructor can take the aircraft up, get it to a safe altitude, and he depresses a switch on the controller. And I'm going to reverse it because it's this one at the back.
This one here?
Right. So you depress that as the instructor, and the student now flies with his controller connected by the wire. As soon as he gets it in a position where you don't want it, you just release, and the instructor takes over.
So sort of like the old style cars that had two steering wheels.
Dual control. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And so with those, we very seldom have crashes on beginners airplanes. If you learn on your own, you're going to crash. There's no doubt. So that's really one of the big advantages of joining a club, and then the camaraderie of being with a bunch of guys.
I thought it was, let's just go find a high school football field or something like that, but the clubs themselves have sponsored areas where they can, where it's purpose created or established for this kind of hobby.
Yes. Schoolyards, some of the smaller planes can be flown there, but finding a good place to land is a problem. The clubs have manicured grass runways. The club I belong to, the runway is about 1,300 feet by 300 feet. It's a big piece of grass.
It's grass.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's mowed twice a week, and we roll it twice a year. So it's like a golf fairway.
Course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So, if you are involved with a club, do you have competitions within the clubs, or do you have competitions cross clubs? How does that work?
Yeah, there are competitions all over. There's a national set of competitions, and they're held in Muncie, Indiana. And all of the disciplines I mentioned before, the aerobatics, the pylon racing, the combat, there are events once a year for each of those. But at a club level, there are also competitions. Primarily the aerobatics seem to be the biggest attraction. We also have just what we call fly-ins. It's not a competition. It's just an opportunity to get a lot of the aircraft together of a certain discipline. Like we'll have a warbirds fly-in. And people will come around from other local clubs will get together, fly our aircraft, compare them. We'll usually have some prizes for the best looking one, or the one that flies the best, or maybe the best crash, or those kinds of prizes. But it's not really a competition as such. It's more just an opportunity to show your aircraft and look at other people's aircraft.
So there's a huge social component as with
it is, yeah.
A lot of hobbies.
And then there's a world level, which is, the world championships are held at various countries around the world every second year, I believe it is. Last year, 2013, the aerobatic competition was held in South Africa, which is kind of near and dear to me. But I think it's moving now to Brazil. So each 2 years they have the world championships for the various disciplines.
So how long does it take a person to learn how to fly a radio control?
Yeah, how long does it learn to drive a car? It varies by individual. Some people learn very quickly, and also how much time they can put into it. You can get simulators for your computer, which really accelerate the learning curve. But typically, one season and you're proficient.
Okay.
Yeah,
and having a pilot background doesn't necessarily help you, as you mentioned before.
Not necessarily. It helps you with understanding the fundamentals of flight. So a pilot usually will get it pretty quickly because he knows what to look for in terms of a stall and the control surfaces on the aircraft, etc. But it's that third-person perspective that takes all of us a little longer to develop than if you were in the plane.
So we talked about this particular model.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about, maybe more about this larger
Sure.
one, which I think is big, which you're saying is not so big.
Yeah, that's a pretty average size aircraft. It's a model of a P-51B, which is the early version of the Mustang, probably one of the most recognizable airframes in aviation history. A very successful fighter in World War II. The Tuskegee Airmen flew them, the Red Tails. This particular one, like you say, is the B model, so it was an early version. It was designed for an electric propulsion system. I happen to have an internal combustion engine that was about the right size, so I did a little bit of modification on the nose to strengthen it for the vibration from internal combustion. It has what we call a 40 size engine, which is about a 7 cc capacity. It runs on a glow fuel. Primarily methanol, but it has some oil and some nitro in it. This one has quite a few functions, so it's got the basic flight controls. We talk about roll, which is this way. That's your first control. Pitch is the second. Yaw is the third, and then throttle control is the fourth. So it has those 4 primary ones, but then it also has retractable landing gear. It has flaps, and then I can drop bombs from it as well.
You can drop pseudo bombs.
Pseudo bombs. They're just little styrofoam bomb-shaped bombs. But it's kind of fun to try and hit a target on the runway. So.
And you have a jet over here, don't you?
A jet? Oh, yes. This one is relatively new in concept for model radio control. It's called a ducted fan, and as the name would imply, there's a fan inside the aircraft driven by an electric motor. It spins at about 40,000 RPM, so pretty fast. sucks in air in here just like a regular jet, and then propels it out there.
So the air comes out back here. And
Right.
this is made of styrofoam.
It's a styrofoam model. Yeah, it weighs just less than a pound. This one's not particularly fast. It's probably 50 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. But some
And that's not fast.
not for these. For some of the ducted fans, they're getting over 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
But a lot more power. This has only been possible recently with lithium polymer batteries. Before that, the battery technology
was
too heavy. Yeah. So that's another form of flying that we're enjoying.
Okay. We also have some video of some planes actually flying.
Yes.
So let's take a look at those videos, and you can walk us through what's going on.
All right. Yeah, the first one is a larger aircraft. This one is powered by a 62cc gasoline engine, much like you'd have in a leaf blower. It's an AT6 Texan trainer with a smoke system, and it shows some of the aerobatic capability of these models. It's over 100, I think 101 inch wingspan, weighs about 35 pounds, and this one has been a great aircraft for me to fly. I've really enjoyed it.
So this is your aircraft?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the aerobatics, and from this distance, you couldn't tell it's a model.
Right.
Is that the point?
That's what we try to do. Yeah. If that's a compliment, because that is what we try to do, is make it look as realistic as possible.
Oh, I'm getting some pretty good height there too.
Get some height.
Oh, it's doing the stall.
Yeah, and we've got the smoke coming out against the blue sky, which really shows up nicely. 4-point roll.
So this looks like a biplane.
Yeah, here we have a biplane that's electric powered, which is kind of nice if you don't want to annoy the neighbors. Also a fairly large aircraft. This one I think is about a 65-inch wingspan. It's a model of a Sopwith Camel, and it's one of the toughest planes I've ever had to fly, but it's a lot of fun.
So this one's electric as opposed to a combustion engine.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Also runs on lithium batteries.
So this video is from the plane's perspective.
Yeah, here we've got a GoPro camera on a glider that's being towed by a tug.
Oh, this is a glider.
Yeah, also the glider and tug are both radio controlled. There's two.
Oh, there's a plane in front of it. Oh,
Yeah.
now I see it.
Yeah. So a friend of mine is flying that. He's tugging the glider. I'm trying to control the glider behind him. And the trick here is to stay lying behind the aircraft that's towing you. Really difficult the first few times we did it. There it's released. Now the glider is on its own looking for thermals, and the tug goes down and lands.
So the other plane is landing. Someone is still flying this glider.
Right. Yep.
How do you figure out where it's going to land?
Well, you land back where you took off if you can help it, and here we go in for the landing. But you search for the thermals, and when you eventually run out of them, you got to have yourself enough altitude so you can get back to the landing strip.
Well, that must take a little experience.
Yeah, there's been a few times we didn't make it.
Okay. Well, those are really great videos. Like I said, from a distance, they look like real planes, not like model planes.
Yeah, that's what we try to do, and it's not always easy. The planes tend to want to jump around a little bit. We saw examples there of gasoline engines, electric. I did bring along with me a gasoline engine. This is a twin-cylinder 40cc engine. It would fly a plane probably in the range of about 90-inch wingspan. A little bit more sophisticated than you would see on a weed whacker or a blower, in that it's a twin-cylinder, and we use electronic ignition for these. But that's it. It runs on regular gasoline, just like you'd use on a leaf blower, mixed gasoline.
How do you decide whether you want to use an electric engine versus a gas engine?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's very personal. The electrics are quieter. They're probably simpler, but the batteries are expensive, and they can be dangerous if they're misused. These can be dangerous because you've got a blade spinning at about 10,000 RPM in front, and the electrics do that as well. So it's not really a clear-cut decision. It's very personal, what your personal choice is. Some people fly electrics only, some fly gasoline only. I enjoy them all.
Is there a flight duration difference between the two? Does one last longer than the other?
Not really. The batteries, for example, in this one, I can get about a 15-minute flight out of it. The internal combustion P51, I get about a 10-minute flight. I could go with a slightly larger tank and push it to 15 minutes. We find that 8 to 10 minutes is about as long as you want to be concentrating on a flight anyway.
So this is not like a 30-minute to 1 hour.
No, the gliders can be that way if you get a good thermal, but typically we go for about 10-minute flights.
Okay. Well, so all the great information. Where can people go to find out more about how to get involved in radio control?
Probably the best is the modelaircraft.org website, www.modelaircraft.org. That website will give you local clubs. There are some great clubs in this area. Radio Control Club of Detroit, Pontiac Model Aircraft, PMAC, P-M-A-C. There's Sky Masters, but those are all available from the website. And then the local hobby shops, Nankin next door here, Prop Shop over on 9 Mile, and I think it's Van Dyke is a really good supply.
The Prop Shop?
Yeah, it's called the Prop Shop. And the guys in these shops know that the hobby. They can give you advice much more than you could ever get online. Online, as you know, some of it's good and some of it's not so good.
There's data and there's information, and you have to figure out which one it is.
And then north of here, there's Flightline, also run by a really good guy and very knowledgeable staff at Flightline as well. So those are the three that I'm aware of in the area. So that's usually where we go. So clubs, shops, and the website.
So you highly recommend being part of a club?
I do. I love it. It's a good bunch of guys, and we have a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. Well, we're about out of time. Thanks for joining us. Look for future episodes of Exploring Hobbies.